John Miller, a reserved millionaire in the tech industry, invites his shy secretary, Diane Still, to his company's annual event and falls in love with her intelligence and determination. But they never imagined that. Can an unexpected connection survive the traps of a world filled with power and intrigue? Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching the video from. And don't forget to subscribe. John Miller sat at his sleek, glass-top desk, the ambient hum of technology enveloping him like a second skin. The walls of his modern office were lined with digital screens, each one flickering with data streams and analytical graphs. A lone potted plant stood in the corner, its vibrant green leaves contrasting sharply with the sterile, metal aesthetic of his workspace. John's focus was unwavering as he scrolled through endless emails, each one vying for his attention in the bustling world of the tech industry. Despite the excitement that often accompanied his position as a new millionaire, a palpable sense of loneliness hung in the air around him. He had always been a man of few words, preferring the company of numbers and algorithms over that of people. His team, a motley crew of youthful developers and seasoned analysts, thrived on collaboration and creativity, yet John found himself increasingly detached from their spirited discussions. He would glance up occasionally, witnessing bursts of laughter and animated debates, but the warmth of their camaraderie felt like a distant echo. In his solitude, John's eyes would often drift to the window, where the city sprawled beneath him, alive and vibrant. Yet he remained anchored in a bubble of isolation. As he returned to his work, John unwittingly tapped into the growing realization of his own loneliness. The tech world was fast-paced and relentless. His success had come at a cost. He had sacrificed personal connections in pursuit of his dreams, and now, as he stared at the glowing screen in front of him, he felt a gnawing emptiness that even the thrill of his accomplishments could not fill. A soft knock on the door broke his reverie, and he looked up to see Diane Still, his secretary, standing hesitantly in the doorway. Diane was a stark contrast to the bustling energy of the office. With her soft features and quiet demeanor, she often blended into the background, a mere shadow among the more exuberant personalities that filled the room. She was diligent and efficient, yet her brilliance frequently went unnoticed. Most of her colleagues preferred to overlook her contributions, focusing instead on the louder voices that commanded attention. Diane had learned to navigate this world with grace, often retreating into her work, where she felt most comfortable. Today, she carried a stack of papers, her brow slightly furrowed in concentration. John observed her as she approached, noting how she seemed to embody a sense of quiet strength, even if it was masked by her shyness. As she organized the documents on his desk, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of admiration for her tenacity. Diane was one of the few people who could see beyond the surface of his stoic exterior, recognizing the weight of his responsibilities without uttering a word. She was always there, ready to assist, yet he had never taken the time to truly understand her. The atmosphere in the office shifted as the day progressed. Colleagues filtered in and out, their conversations punctuated by laughter and the clattering of keyboards. John remained absorbed in his work, but his attention occasionally strayed to Diane. He noticed the way she engaged with her tasks, her brow furrowing in concentration as she navigated complex spreadsheets or crafted meticulous reports. Unbeknownst to her, she possessed a talent for understanding intricate concepts, translating them into accessible ideas that could inspire others. Yet, in the whirlwind of deadlines and expectations, her gifts lay hidden, overlooked by those who failed to see the depth of her intellect. It was during a critical meeting that the tides began to turn. John had gathered his team to discuss a new project that had the potential to reshape their company's future. The room buzzed with excitement, filled with ideas and aspirations. As the discussion unfolded, John felt the weight of the moment resting heavily on his shoulders. He had prepared meticulously, yet as he glanced around the room, he sensed a growing impatience among his colleagues. They were eager for direction, hungry for inspiration, and he could feel the pressure mounting. In a sudden surge of instinct, John decided to improvise. He turned toward Diane, who sat quietly at the edge of the room, her eyes downcast as she took notes. Without thinking, he called her name, inviting her to share her insights on the project. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned toward her. Diane's cheeks flushed a deep crimson, and for a fleeting moment, she seemed paralyzed by the unexpected attention. John held his breath, watching as she gathered herself, the gears of her mind visibly turning as she processed the request. With a hesitant yet determined grace, Diane rose to her feet. As she stepped forward, her posture straightened, and a spark ignited in her eyes. She began to articulate her thoughts with clarity and precision, drawing from her extensive knowledge of the project and its potential impact. The words flowed from her lips like a well-rehearsed melody, resonating through the room with a confidence that surprised everyone, even herself. The tension that had once filled the air dissipated, replaced by a palpable energy as her colleagues leaned in, captivated by her eloquence. John listened intently, his admiration for Diane growing with each passing moment. He realized that he had underestimated her abilities, failing to recognize the wealth of knowledge she possessed. As she spoke, he saw her transform from a timid secretary into a formidable force, commanding the room with her insights. The astonishment etched on the faces of his colleagues mirrored his own feelings of awe. Diane was not just a background player. She was a hidden gem, radiating brilliance that had gone unnoticed for far too long. As the meeting drew to a close, applause erupted, reverberating through the walls of the conference room. John found himself at the forefront of the applause, his heart swelling with pride for Diane. She looked momentarily taken aback by the enthusiastic response, her modesty returning as she quickly glanced down, a shy smile creeping onto her lips. In that moment, John understood that this was not merely a chance for Diane to shine. It was a revelation for him as well. He had been so engrossed in his own world of isolation that he had failed to see the potential of those around him. As the team dispersed, John felt a sense of urgency to connect with Diane, to acknowledge her brilliance and the impact she had made. He rose from his seat, his heart racing as he approached her. In the aftermath of the meeting, the bustling noise of the office faded into the background, leaving only the two of them in that moment. Diane looked up, her expression a mix of surprise and uncertainty as she met his gaze. John could see a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, and it stirred something deep within him. He realized that he wanted to know more about her, to understand the story behind the shy secretary who had just captivated an entire room. The loneliness that had once enveloped him began to dissipate, replaced by a burgeoning curiosity and an inexplicable connection to Diane. Little did he know that this was just the beginning of a journey that would intertwine their lives in ways he could never have anticipated. As John Miller walked through the sleek and modern hallways of his company, his mind was still racing with thoughts of Diane's unexpected brilliance during the presentation. He marveled at how her quiet demeanor could hide such a profound talent. It was a rarity to find someone who could convey complex ideas so effortlessly, and he felt a sense of admiration swell within him. He had seen many capable individuals in his short yet impactful career in the tech industry, but Diane stood out in a way that intrigued him. With each passing day, her potential became more apparent, and he couldn't shake the feeling that she deserved to be recognized for it. The annual company gala was approaching, a prestigious event filled with glitz and glamour. As he prepared the invitation list, he felt an impulse he couldn't ignore. He wanted Diane to be there. The thought of her, dressed elegantly and shining in a sea of suits and dresses, sent a wave of excitement through him. He imagined her standing at his side, her shy smile radiating warmth amid the crowd. It was a bold move, but John was inspired by Diane's talent and determination. He wanted to give her the opportunity to shine outside the confines of the office. When John approached Diane's desk, she was engrossed in her work, her brow furrowed in concentration. The faint glow from her computer screen illuminated her face, highlighting the delicate features that often went unnoticed. He cleared his throat, and she looked up, startled by his presence. He felt a pang of guilt for interrupting her focus, but pushed it aside, determined to follow through with his decision. He extended the invitation, and a moment of silence enveloped them. Diane's eyes widened in disbelief, and he watched her process the unexpected proposal. He could see her heart racing, her thoughts flickering behind her expressive gaze. The invitation wasn't merely a gesture. It was a chance for Diane to step into a world where she could be seen and appreciated. John felt a sense of purpose as he watched her reaction transform from surprise to elation, then finally to a flicker of anxiety. He understood that stepping into such a glamorous environment would be daunting for someone like her, who had always kept to the sidelines. Yet, he believed in her, and that belief imbued him with confidence. As Diane prepared for the gala in her modest apartment, the excitement mingled with trepidation. She stood in front of her full-length mirror, examining her reflection. The modest outfits that filled her closet felt inadequate for the grand occasion. Diane had always been practical, preferring simplicity over extravagance, but this was different. This was an opportunity to step out of her comfort zone, to show the world a side of herself that she often kept hidden. She rifled through her clothes, her mind drifting to her childhood. Memories of her humble upbringing flooded back. Her parents working tirelessly to provide a stable life, instilling in her the values of hard work and perseverance. She recalled the small victories that had led her to this moment, each one a stepping stone on her journey. The gala represented more than just a night of celebration. It symbolized her dreams and aspirations, her desire to be recognized for her intellect and capability. With a determined sigh, Diane made a decision. She would wear the little black dress that had been tucked away in the back of her closet, its classic elegance a perfect match for the occasion. It had been a gift from her mother, a reminder that beauty comes in many forms, and she felt a surge of courage as she slipped into it. The fabric clung to her in a way that made her feel both vulnerable and empowered. The subtle shimmer under the light reflected her inner spark, and for the first time, Diane saw herself not just as John's secretary, but as a woman deserving of admiration. As she applied her makeup with care, each brush stroke felt like a ritual. She wanted to present herself authentically, showcasing her personality without losing a sense of humility. Every detail mattered. She wanted to make John proud, to show him that she could hold her own in his world. Her heart raced at the thought of the gala, the elegant setting, and the potential for connection. The evening finally arrived, and as Diane stepped into the grand venue, her breath caught in her throat. The opulence was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the polished marble floor. Guests mingled, their laughter and chatter creating a symphony of social interactions, while waiters glided through the crowd, offering trays of exquisite hors d'oeuvres. Diane felt a wave of anxiety wash over her, but she quickly reminded herself of the reason she was there. This was her chance to shine, to embrace a world beyond her usual confines. John spotted her from across the room, his heart racing at the sight of Diane. She looked stunning, the little black dress accentuating her figure in a way that was both tasteful and elegant. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, framing her face perfectly. He felt a swell of pride as she approached him, her demeanor tinged with a mix of excitement and nervousness. As they began to navigate through the crowd, John introduced Diane to his colleagues, who greeted her with polite smiles. However, he could sense the undercurrents of judgment lurking beneath the surface. Whispers and sideways glances followed them, and Diane's posture shifted slightly, her confidence faltering. John felt a protective instinct rise within him. He wanted to shield her from the condescending comments that occasionally accompanied his world. Despite the initial discomfort, Diane found solace in John's presence. He was attentive, his genuine interest in her shining through as they shared stories about their backgrounds. The connection between them deepened as they spoke about their dreams, ambitions, and the challenges they had faced. Diane felt a rare sense of belonging, a feeling that she had often longed for in her career. As the night wore on, Diane began to relax, her laughter mingling with the music that filled the air. She felt a sense of liberation, a reminder that she was more than just an assistant. In John's eyes, she saw a reflection of herself, a woman capable of achieving greatness despite the obstacles. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, each word strengthening the bond that had begun to form between them. In that moment, surrounded by the glittering lights and the hum of the gala, Diane realized that she had taken a significant step forward. This night was not just about the accolades or the recognition, but about embracing who she was and who she could become. She felt empowered, and with every glance exchanged with John, she was reminded that her hidden talents were finally being acknowledged. As the evening came to a close, Diane and John stood together, their connection palpable in the electric air. The world around them faded away, leaving only the warmth of shared dreams and aspirations. It was a moment that neither of them would soon forget, a turning point that would shape their lives in ways they were yet to fully understand. The gala had opened a door, and together, they were prepared to step through it, hand in hand, into a future filled with promise and possibility. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere at the gala was electric, filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of conversations blending into a symphony of celebration. John Miller, standing tall in his tailored suit, felt a sense of pride as he introduced Diane Still to his colleagues. He had taken a bold step by inviting her, recognizing her hidden brilliance, and now he was eager to showcase her to the world that had previously overlooked her talents. However, as he led her through the crowd, he couldn't shake off the sense of unease that lingered in the air. Diane walked beside him, her heart racing with a cocktail of excitement and anxiety. She wore a stunning emerald dress that hugged her frame perfectly, a sharp contrast to the understated elegance of her usual attire. Her hair cascaded in soft waves, framing her face and highlighting the flush of her cheeks. Yet, despite her striking appearance, she felt the weight of scrutiny as they mingled among the elite of the tech industry. Whispers wrapped around her like a shroud, and she could feel the gaze of her colleagues, some filled with admiration, others tinged with condescension. As John introduced Diane to a group of executives, she felt their eyes dissecting her. They were quick to make assumptions, their expressions revealing their skepticism. One man, a senior vice president with an air of superiority, leaned closer, his tone dripping with insincerity as he complimented her dress. His gaze lingered a moment too long, and Diane's stomach twisted in discomfort. She managed a polite smile, her heart pounding as she fought the urge to retreat behind John. John, oblivious to the condescending undertones, was eager to showcase Diane's capabilities. He spoke highly of her contributions to the company, recounting the impressive presentation that had caught everyone's attention during the meeting. However, as he spoke, he noticed the smirks and raised eyebrows among his peers. The dismissive glances exchanged between them spoke volumes, and he felt a surge of protectiveness over Diane. She deserved more than this atmosphere of judgment and ridicule. Diane, on the other hand, was painfully aware of the whispers swirling around her like a storm. She could hear snippets of conversation, comments about her being just a secretary, about how John must have felt compelled to bring someone from the office to the gala, as if she were merely a token gesture. Each remark felt like a pinprick, and she struggled to maintain her composure. John's voice was a steady presence beside her, but she could sense the tension in the air. As the evening wore on, Diane found herself shrinking into the background. She felt like an outsider in a world that sparkled with glamour and prestige, a world she had only glimpsed from afar. John continued to engage with his colleagues, but she sensed the widening gap between them, the stark contrast of her humble beginnings and their polished personas. It was as if she was a fragile flower in a garden of exotic blooms, struggling to find her place amid the vibrant colors that surrounded her. The atmosphere shifted abruptly when Catherine Ice made her grand entrance. Her presence was magnetic, drawing attention like a moth to a flame. Dressed in a striking red gown that accentuated her features, she glided into the room with an air of confidence that was both captivating and intimidating. Catherine was everything Diane wasn't: polished, charismatic, and effortlessly charming. The moment John spotted her, a flicker of tension crossed his face, and Diane's heart sank. She recognized the familiar spark of drama that Catherine brought with her. Catherine wasted no time in making her way toward John, her smile disarming and predatory. Diane felt her stomach twist as she observed the interaction between the two. It was clear that Catherine had not forgotten their past, and she was determined to reclaim a piece of John's attention. Diane stood frozen, acutely aware of the weight of the situation. The air felt thick with competition, and she could almost hear the unspoken challenge echoing between them. John attempted to maintain his composure, but Diane could see the flicker of discomfort in his eyes. Catherine's laughter rang like a bell, bright and insistent, as she leaned in close to John, her body language inviting. Diane felt like an intruder in a moment that was supposed to be shared between two people who once held a history. She couldn't help but feel small and insignificant in the face of Catherine's boldness. As the two women stood there, a silent battle unfolded. Catherine's gaze was sharp, her intentions clear as she sought to undermine Diane's presence. She made pointed comments laced with sarcasm, her words designed to belittle Diane's accomplishments, to poke holes in the fragile bubble of confidence that John had built around her. Diane could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, a mix of embarrassment and anger bubbling beneath the surface. She wanted to defend herself, to stand up against the onslaught, but the fear of confrontation held her back. John, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, felt a surge of protectiveness over Diane. He had always admired her quiet strength, and witnessing Catherine's behavior ignited a fire within him. He couldn't allow Diane to be belittled in front of him, especially not by someone who had been a part of his past. With determination, he stepped forward, placing himself firmly between the two women, his posture signaling that he would not tolerate Catherine's antics. In that moment, a palpable tension filled the air. Diane watched as John defended her, his voice calm yet assertive. He acknowledged Diane's contributions, emphasizing her intelligence and talent in a way that silenced the room. The shift in the dynamics was electric, and for the first time that evening, Diane felt a flicker of hope. John's words were a shield, wrapping around her like a protective barrier against the storm that Catherine had unleashed. Catherine's expression darkened, the playful facade slipping away to reveal a simmering jealousy. The smile that had graced her lips moments before was replaced with a scowl, her eyes narrowing as she realized that John would not be swayed so easily. Diane could see the gears turning in Catherine's mind, the realization that her charm was not enough to reclaim what she once had. The tension between them thickened, a mixture of rivalry and resentment hanging in the air. As the evening unfolded, Diane felt a transformation within herself. John's defense rekindled a spark of confidence that had been dimmed by the earlier condescension. She realized that she was not merely a secretary in the shadows. She was a woman with ambitions and talents deserving of recognition. The glances from her colleagues, once filled with skepticism, now felt like a challenge she was ready to meet head-on. The gala continued around them, a vibrant backdrop to the drama that had unfolded. Diane stood tall beside John, their connection deepening in the face of adversity. As they navigated the waves of judgment and jealousy, she found strength in his presence, a reminder that she was not alone. The night may have started with uncertainty, but now, as she looked up at him, Diane felt a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. In that moment, as the music swelled and the lights sparkled overhead, Diane realized that her journey was just beginning. She was ready to embrace her talents, to step into her own light, and to confront whatever challenges lay ahead, hand in hand with John. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through Diane Still's bedroom window, she stirred awake. Her mind immediately flooded with memories of the previous evening's gala. An internal whirlwind of emotions engulfed her: excitement, disbelief, and an undercurrent of doubt. The pristine memories of her unexpected connection with John Miller clashed with the insecurities that had been her constant companions for years. She sat up, the soft sheets pooling around her waist, and allowed herself a moment to bask in the warmth of the night. Yet, the shadows of uncertainty loomed large. Diane recalled how John's eyes had lit up as she spoke, his genuine interest making her feel seen for the first time in a long while. His laughter, sincere and inviting, had wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. Yet, the moment she had stepped away from the spotlight and returned to the sidelines, the weight of her reality pressed down on her. She was still the timid secretary, a background player in a world dominated by the powerful and affluent. Could a man like John truly see her, or was he merely captivated by the novelty of her hidden talents? As she slipped out of bed and padded to the bathroom, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. The reflection staring back at her carried traces of the confidence she had felt the night before, but it was accompanied by the familiar self-doubt that had plagued her for years. Diane splashed cold water on her face, hoping to shake off the remnants of insecurity. She needed to prepare for work, to walk back into the corporate world that had always felt just a little too big for her. Meanwhile, John Miller sat in his sleek office, the hum of technology surrounding him like a second skin. His mind, too, was occupied by the previous night's events. The gala had been a whirlwind of glitz and glamour, yet it was Diane who had left an indelible mark on his heart. He replayed her presentations in his mind, each word she had spoken resonating with authenticity and intellect. The way she had captivated the audience while remaining blissfully unaware of her own power was both enchanting and perplexing. But now, as he sat in his office, the reality of his life began to creep back in. Catherine Ice, his ex-fiancée, had resurfaced in his life, her presence a reminder of the past he had tried to leave behind. John shifted in his chair, a frown creasing his brow. He had loved Catherine once, but that love had faded, replaced by a growing admiration for Diane. Yet, the tug of guilt was hard to shake. What if he was simply filling a void left by Catherine's departure? The thought gnawed at him, and he struggled to come to terms with it. That afternoon, as Diane settled into her desk, she felt the familiar rhythm of the office. The chatter of her colleagues buzzed around her, but today it felt different. There was a weight in the air, a tension that made her skin prickle. She glanced around, searching for signs of judgment or condescension, but the office appeared as it always did, busy and indifferent. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that whispers followed her every move, especially after the attention she had received the night before. As the hours ticked by, Diane found herself lost in her work, but her mind drifted back to John. She wondered if he had thought about her since the gala, if the connection they had shared meant anything to him. Her heart raced at the thought of seeing him again, yet a pang of fear accompanied it. What if she had misread him? What if he was merely being kind, feeling pity for her? Meanwhile, John had made a mental note to check in on Diane. He wanted to see her, to ensure she was doing all right after the gala. The memories of her brilliance were still fresh in his mind, and he couldn't shake off the feeling that she deserved to be celebrated, not just for her work, but for who she was. He was acutely aware of the undercurrents of judgment that often swept through the office, and a sense of protectiveness bloomed within him. As the day wore on, John received a message from Catherine requesting a private meeting. His stomach twisted. He had hoped to avoid her for as long as possible, but he knew that ignoring her would only escalate the situation. With a resigned sigh, he agreed to meet her later that afternoon, bracing himself for whatever emotional manipulation she might employ. When the time came, John found himself in his favorite conference room, the glass walls providing a view of the city below. He stared out into the distance, watching the world bustle by, feeling more isolated than ever. The sound of heels clicking against the polished floor broke his reverie, and he turned to see Catherine enter the room. She was dressed impeccably, her presence commanding as always. Catherine wasted no time. She launched into a carefully crafted speech, weaving together memories of their past, painting a picture of the life they had shared. Her voice was smooth, melodic, and laced with an undercurrent of desperation. John felt a familiar tug of nostalgia, but he was resolute. He had moved on, hadn't he? Yet, as she spoke, the seeds of doubt began to take root in his mind. Would he ever find someone who understood him the way she did? Catherine's manipulation became increasingly apparent as she played on his emotions. She reminded him of the plans they had made, the dreams they had shared, and how easily they could slip back into that rhythm. John's heart raced. He could feel the pull of the past, but he also felt the strength of his feelings for Diane anchoring him. The contrast between the two women was stark. Catherine represented the life he had known, while Diane embodied the potential of a future he had yet to explore. As John wrestled with his thoughts, Catherine leaned in closer, her tone shifting to one of vulnerability. She spoke of loneliness, of being lost without him, and John felt the familiar ache of empathy. Yet, alongside it, another feeling surged, a fierce protectiveness for Diane, who had shown him a side of life he had barely glimpsed before. The juxtaposition of the two women left him in turmoil, his heart battling with his head. Returning to his office, John felt the weight of his decision looming over him. He had to choose a path, yet the direction was obscured by the fog of his emotions. Diane, with her quiet strength, had drawn him in, challenging him to see beyond the surface of wealth and power. Catherine, with her charm and history, sought to pull him back into a world that no longer suited him. As he sat at his desk, the afternoon light streaming through the window, John realized he could not allow himself to be swayed by guilt or nostalgia. He needed to confront his feelings, to clarify what he truly wanted. With his heart racing, he resolved to reach out to Diane, to see her, to talk to her. It was time to embrace the uncertainty and explore the possibilities that lay ahead, even if it meant confronting the shadows of his past. In the days that followed, as Diane continued to navigate the complexities of her job and her burgeoning feelings for John, she felt a shift within herself. The insecurities that had long held her captive began to dissolve, replaced by a newfound determination. She wanted more than just to be a secretary. She wanted to be seen, to be valued for her talents and her dreams. And perhaps, just perhaps, she could be more than a fleeting moment in John's life. John, too, was on the cusp of a revelation, one that would shape the course of their intertwined fates. The weight of his choices pressed down on him, but the thought of Diane, her laughter, her intelligence, and her kindness, gave him the courage to move forward. As they both prepared for what lay ahead, the world around them hummed with potential, a tapestry of possibilities waiting to be woven together. The journey of self-discovery and love had only just begun, but the threads of their destinies were already beginning to intertwine in ways they could not yet fully comprehend. Diane sat at her desk, the soft hum of the office enveloping her like a familiar blanket. The sunlight streamed through the large glass windows, casting a warm glow on her workspace. She had settled into the rhythm of her day, organizing files and responding to emails, but her mind drifted back to the gala. The memory of John's smile, the way he had looked at her as if she were more than just his secretary, warmed her heart. Yet, the euphoria of that night began to fade, overshadowed by a nagging sense of unease. As she clicked through her emails, an unfamiliar notification popped up on her screen. It was an anonymous message, the words stark against the bright background of her monitor. "Beware, Diane. Not everyone is happy about your rising closeness with John. Watch your back." The message sent a chill down her spine. She leaned back in her chair, the reality of her situation settling in. The world of high-stakes corporate politics was a dangerous place, and she had unwittingly stepped into the spotlight. Diane quickly scanned the office, her heart racing. Was someone really trying to sabotage her? The thought made her stomach churn. She had spent years working diligently, often overlooked by her colleagues, and now that she had finally begun to emerge from her shell, it felt like a trap was being laid. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she had faced challenges before. But this felt different. This was not just about her career. It was about the burgeoning connection she felt with John, a connection that seemed to threaten the status quo. John, immersed in a meeting with his senior management team, felt a sudden shift in the atmosphere. He had been discussing the upcoming projects, his enthusiasm palpable, when one of his associates casually mentioned Diane. The name hung in the air, and he could sense the change in tone around the table. The murmurs grew louder, and he could see the judgment in their eyes. He had invited Diane into his world, and now it appeared that world was not prepared to welcome her. The meeting concluded, and as the team dispersed, John found himself alone with his thoughts. He recalled the way Diane had shone during the gala, her intelligence and grace standing out among the polished facade of his colleagues. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the moment they had shared was now under threat. He needed to protect her, not just from the whispers of the office, but from the shadows lurking in his own past. As he walked back to his office, John's mind raced. He thought of Catherine, his ex-fiancée, and the way she had tried to manipulate him since their breakup. He hadn't seen her since the gala, but he knew she would not take kindly to his growing affection for Diane. It was as if he were standing on a precipice, the ground beneath him shifting with every passing moment. Determined to shield Diane from any negativity, he resolved to confront not only Catherine but also his own fears about their relationship. Back at her desk, Diane's thoughts spiraled. She needed to speak with John, to tell him about the message, but the fear of sounding paranoid held her back. Would he think she was overreacting? Would he see her as weak? The internal battle raged on, and she felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. Suddenly, the door to her office opened, and John stepped in, his expression a mix of concern and determination. Before Diane could speak, he reached for her hand, his grip firm yet gentle. The warmth of his touch sent a rush of reassurance through her. He had always been a steady presence in her life, and the way he looked at her now made her feel valued and seen. She was about to voice her worries when the office door swung open again, and Catherine walked in, her entrance as dramatic as ever. Catherine's presence filled the room, cold and sharp, cutting through the warmth that had just enveloped them. She flashed a polished smile that did not reach her eyes, and John's grip on Diane's hand faltered for a moment. Diane's heart sank. The unspoken tension hung thick in the air, and she could feel the energy shift again, like a storm brewing just outside. "John, I need to speak with you," Catherine said, her voice smooth and persuasive. Diane watched as John hesitated, torn between his past and the present. The flicker of conflict in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. Catherine was here to assert her influence, to remind him of their shared history, and in doing so, she threatened to undermine everything Diane had worked for. As John and Catherine stepped aside, Diane felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. She tried to focus on her work, but her ears perked up at their raised voices. She caught snippets of their conversation, the tension palpable even from a distance. John's voice, usually calm and steady, now carried an edge that sent shivers down her spine. It was clear that he was defending her, but the way Catherine countered left her feeling exposed. Each word that escaped Catherine's lips seemed to chip away at the bond Diane had begun to build with John. Frustration bubbled within her, and she felt the urge to confront them. But what could she say? She was just his secretary, a nobody in the grand scheme of their history. The idea of standing up to Catherine felt daunting, and yet, the thought of retreating into the shadows was unbearable. Diane took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She needed to believe in herself, to trust that she could navigate this treacherous landscape. Just then, she overheard a particularly biting remark from Catherine, a calculated jab aimed squarely at her. The words pierced through the air like a dagger, and Diane's blood ran cold. It was one thing to hear gossip about herself. It was another to have it articulated so maliciously, especially in front of John. She could feel her cheeks flush with a mix of embarrassment and indignation. How dare Catherine belittle her? How dare she assume she could just waltz back into John's life and erase everything they had shared? The conversation continued, and Diane clenched her fists, a newfound determination igniting within her. She had worked too hard to let this woman dictate her worth. If John truly cared for her, he would see through Catherine's manipulations. The thought of leaving her job crossed her mind, but the idea felt like defeat. No, she wouldn't give in to the pressure. She would stand her ground, even if it meant facing the consequences. Summoning her courage, Diane rose from her desk, the chair scraping against the floor as she moved toward the doorway. She caught a glimpse of John's expression, determined yet conflicted, and it fueled her resolve. This was her moment, and she would not let it slip away. As she stepped into the hallway, she could hear the escalating tension between John and Catherine. Each word felt like a battle cry, and in that moment, Diane knew she was ready to fight for her place in this world, for her budding relationship with John, and for herself. Standing firm in the doorway, she prepared to step into the fray. The stakes were high, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of empowerment rising within her. No longer would she hide in the shadows. It was time for her hidden talents to shine. The atmosphere in the expansive office was thick with tension as John Miller faced Catherine Ice. The floor-to-ceiling windows that normally brought in the soft glow of the city skyline now felt like a cage, trapping him in a confrontation he had long dreaded. Catherine stood before him, her posture poised and confident, yet her eyes flickered with a blend of desperation and entitlement. The lavish surroundings, adorned with modern art and sleek furniture, felt cold and impersonal as he struggled to articulate what had been weighing heavily on his heart. Catherine had always been adept at wielding her charm, But today, her tactics felt desperate. She leaned closer, her voice low and conspiratorial, attempting to draw him back into the web of their past. Each word she spoke was laced with nostalgia, evoking memories of shared laughter and dreams that once felt tangible. But John was no longer the man she had once known. The time they spent apart had shaped him, molded him into someone who was no longer swayed by the allure of their previous life together. He could almost hear the echo of Diane's laughter in his mind, a sound that was becoming increasingly significant, overshadowing the memories of his past. As he listened to Catherine, John's determination solidified. He could feel the pull of his emotions, his heart racing as he reflected on the warmth and sincerity Diane brought into his life. She was not merely his secretary. She was a woman of remarkable strength and intelligence, someone who had quietly supported him from the shadows. The realization hit him with clarity. It was time to break free from Catherine's grasp. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the conviction that had surged within him since the gala. "Catherine," he began, his voice steady and resolute, "I appreciate everything we've been through, but I've moved on. Diane is special. She deserves respect, and I will not allow you to undermine her or our relationship." His words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and for a moment, Catherine seemed taken aback. The self-assured woman who had always been in control now faltered, her facade cracking ever so slightly. The silence that followed was deafening. It was a moment of raw vulnerability that felt foreign. She had never expected him to stand his ground like this, to confront her so openly. But John didn't waver. He recalled the moment Diane had astonished everyone at the meeting, her eyes bright with determination as she articulated her ideas. He thought of the way she had opened up to him, revealing her dreams and insecurities. With every heartbeat, a sense of purpose surged within him, a fierce protectiveness that had ignited since he first recognized her talent. Catherine's expression shifted, her surprise morphing into anger. She was not accustomed to being challenged, particularly not by John. She opened her mouth to retaliate, but before she could utter another word, John turned his back to her, a silent declaration that he would no longer entertain her manipulations. As he walked away, the weight of the confrontation lifted, replaced by a pulse of exhilaration. He felt a rush of adrenaline, the thrill of standing up for what he believed in, and for someone he truly cared about. It was in this moment of clarity that he understood the true depth of his feelings for Diane. Just as he reached the door, he heard a voice, one filled with strength and unwavering resolve. Diane stepped forward, her presence a beacon of light amidst the storm. She had arrived just in time. Having overheard the confrontation, her eyes were fierce, a stark contrast to the shy demeanor she often wore. John turned to face her, surprised yet proud. Diane had always shied away from conflict, but here she was, stepping into the fray with a newfound courage. She addressed Catherine, her voice steady and unwavering. The uncertainty that had once clouded her confidence was now replaced with a fierce determination that John had never seen before. Diane faced Catherine, her posture strong, every inch of her radiating an unexpected power. She spoke not just for herself, but for all those who had ever felt belittled or overlooked. "You do not get to dictate who I am or how I should feel," she declared, her voice echoing in the vastness of the office. "I deserve to be here, and I deserve to be respected. You may have had your time, but this is my moment." John watched in awe as Diane stepped fully into her strength, surprising not only Catherine but herself as well. The transformation was palpable. The woman who had been hesitant and uncertain was now standing tall, ready to claim her place in the world. He felt a swell of admiration for her, recognizing that she was no longer the shy secretary but a formidable force in her own right. Catherine's face betrayed a mix of disbelief and anger, her carefully crafted composure slipping. For the first time, she was confronted by someone who would not yield to her manipulative tactics. The power dynamic had shifted, and it was clear that she was losing ground. In that charged moment, John stepped closer to Diane, standing by her side. Their unity was unmistakable, a silent declaration that they would face the challenges ahead together. Catherine's presence, once so dominating, felt diminished in the wake of their combined strength. As the confrontation reached its peak, John felt a sense of liberation wash over him. This was no longer just a fight against Catherine. It was a declaration of his feelings for Diane, a commitment to support her as she stepped into her power. He had admired her strength from afar, but now, standing beside her, he felt emboldened. Catherine's defiance crumbled as she realized the futility of her efforts. The room felt heavy with the weight of her defeat. She took a step back, her expression shifting from anger to resignation. The realization that she had lost this battle, not just to John but also to Diane, was evident. With a final look of disdain, Catherine turned on her heel, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor as she walked away. The sound faded, leaving behind a silence that felt almost sacred. In that stillness, John and Diane exchanged glances, a moment of understanding passing between them. The air felt lighter, charged with the promise of new beginnings. They had faced the storm together and emerged stronger, ready to forge a path free from the shadows of the past. John took Diane's hand, an unspoken bond forming between them, a commitment to navigate the challenges ahead as a team. As they stood together, John felt a sense of hope blossoming within him. This was more than just a romantic connection. It was a partnership built on mutual respect and admiration. Diane's strength inspired him to be a better man, and in turn, he wanted to empower her to reach her full potential. Together, they were ready to embrace whatever came next, united against the negativity that had once surrounded them. In that moment, the world outside faded away, and all that mattered was the bond they were forging. The obstacles they had faced had only strengthened their resolve, and as they stepped into the future, they did so hand in hand, ready to write their own story, one filled with love, passion, and the courage to embrace their true selves.